NAB Amplify. My name is Bryndan Moore. I am overjoyed to have a great friend of mine join us today. We're both going to be participating in the NAB Show's 100th anniversary for the Data Tours and the Data panel discussion. Today I have with me Arisha Smith, business intelligence innovator. And before she comes on, I want to tell a quick story for how well and how long I've known Arisha. It's been fantastic. I met Arisha 15 years ago when she was in broadcast radio and doing at the time a contest with a brand to give away a car. Do you remember this at all?
Yep, absolutely. That was ages ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was an online sweepstakes with the broadcast arm. And we were looking to find multicultural audiences that were engaged, they had a certain level of discretionary income, and that there was a close touch point to where there could be more understanding or a guarantee of the right kind of audience. But go ahead. Right,
exactly. And this year, I'm involved with the NAB show doing the Data Tours, and Orisha is on the, along with our good friend Melvin Wilson, is involved in the panel discussion for the same topic, data. So it's fantastic to be still connected and still connecting on a friendship base as well as on a professional basis. And I'm just overjoyed that we could do this together today. So I'm excited to see you at the show next month.
Wonderful. And I would just have to say, I'm excited to be here with you as well, and to as careers evolve and as titles evolve, the knowledge grows, and then but the people stay the same. So I'm happy to participate in this with you today.
Yes. And now I have a sheet here that has a few of your accolades, but I want to tell people who you are and why they should be excited to hear from you. So Arisha Smith is a business intelligence innovator. She's an innovator in data science and has designed growth strategies for businesses leveraging digital, social, and mobile platforms for over 20 years. Arisha, for the novice, what does that mean?
Well, first of all, you could have just said many years. You gave my age away, so that's all right. But basically what that means is wherever I've worked, whatever brand, whatever platform I've worked, I work with them to help them find ways to basically make more money, to leverage the information they have, their data that they have, and understand what data they would need in order to find new audiences, if it's a broadcast or a content provider, or if it's a publisher, opportunities to sell more sponsorships in different innovative ways that will be delightful for their customers and for themselves, as well as not overbearing for their current audience. So at the end of the day, it's, I'm the money lady, helping people understand how to grow their business, make more money in white spaces in areas that they hadn't necessarily thought about today.
That's fantastic. And I know you've done this for many different organizations, many different companies in many different verticals, from brands to municipalities, nonprofits, agencies, and startups. So it's interesting to me that in the time frame we're talking about, how much technology has influenced and informed what you do. So if we go back to when we were talking about radio, that's, most of us see that as one-way communication. And you, probably being an insider, see it differently. But if you fast forward from there to 2023, we're talking about, night and day in terms of, in my belief, what business owners, brand owners are able to see about their customers. How is that contrast in your experience? Just if you could briefly just talk about the disparity between, what it was like maybe in the early 2000s to do what you do versus today.
You know what? That's an interesting question. And to be honest, it hasn't changed that much. You would be surprised. At the end of the day, all platforms are pretty much just leveraging the information they have. And it really comes down to, which is crazy, email addresses most of the time, because that is the first touch point or the only pixel or digital touch point they have for their audience or their consumers or their potential customers or their current customers, where they can tie together all of the insights and all the behavioral trends to know a little bit more about the people that they want to serve. And so way back in the day with radio, when you think about it, I worked at a syndicated radio show that was on over 118 markets in the United States at the time. And they had an online newsletter. Email was super big back then. This is like 2003, 2004. And then they had a little website. And so on that website, they were just learning to try to understand how to make more money on the website so that when sponsors bought spots on the radio, the spots could live longer. How could they really get the biggest bang for their buck, or 2 bites of the apple? And so with that being said, how that was implemented was, at the end of the day, using email addresses. With those email addresses, we were able to tie all the significant pieces of data together, whether it's how the consumers are listening to the content, whether it's on demand, whether it's live, whether it's in their cars. And then from there, when they come to the website, all of the executions and activations that they do, whether if they read a certain amount of content in sports, or if they participate in an online giveaway or a sweepstakes. And so you got frequency, the how, what, when, where. What that does right way back then, think about it. That's what we're doing right now with omnichannel. If I like to buy a pair of jeans from my favorite brand or retailer in the store, or do I like to buy them online? How do I buy them? Do I hear it from, get a commercial on radio and then go to the website and buy? Or am I getting an SMS and then converting from there to purchase? It's the same thing, literally, and it's just tied together with one. As long as you have one unifier, or one, they call it now an identity spine. From that, there's many pieces, in which you can operate. So how that's changed, I would say now, is how people understand it. Way back then, and over time, people, weren't necessarily understanding. It seems strange. It seems, a hard concept to grasp. And so, we were, at that point, I worked in the internet side, but constantly talking to the radio personalities, giving them the tidbits. Hey, these are the key words you need to say. Hey, here's when you need to send people to the website. Hey, here's when you need to, those prompts. And so now more platforms understand it, that they need the information, but however, they don't necessarily understand the science behind it, or they don't understand necessarily the scale in which it can really help them make more money and help them build their platforms that help their platforms grow.
Right. Fantastic. Next question for you. How do content providers and platforms ensure that they're leveraging their audience to grow, to extend their audience viewership and listening?
Gotcha. So what's interesting is and that's a great segue. Most content platforms, whether it's a podcast or whether it's a broadcast air show, or if it's a streaming platform, they'll have some insights, but they'll want to look to third-party insights, meaning they may say, oh, well, what do our Nielsen numbers say? Or what do our ComScore numbers say? And it's like, why would you do that when you have zero-party data, which is the best, highest, richest, most qualified data to inform you about your potential customers or your current listeners? You take that and you enrich it and you expand it to understand who else would be great consumers of my content. So number one, I always say, start with the information you have. It's the richest, it's the most informative. And then from there, understand what are your spaces in which you need to grow the information or the data that you have. So if you are a content provider and you know that you have email addresses of your consumers, you don't know anything else about them. You don't know their age. You don't know where they're listening from. Their zip codes. You don't know any of the other demographics that would be helpful for you for targeting. Send a survey. Ask. Simple as that. You would be surprised as far as, surveying and asking questions to expand your current data lake. You want to build your own data lake, because from there, the more rich that is, when you look to enrich it with second-party data or third-party data, meaning, say you have another brand that wants to be a customer and they already have data on their customers. They understand their customers and they want to say, hey, where's the connective tissue? The synergies between our customers and your customers, then you have the ability to blend it because you have a rich pool to start with. So I always say, learn more about your best or your best sellers or your best customers. Once you know more about them, once you know where you are, you'll understand where you need to go.
As a consumer, just to put your consumer hat on for a second, how should we feel about the idea that companies are using data and our own data to provide new offers or create new customer journeys for us? Should we feel like it's a help to us, or a hindrance, or how should we feel?
Right. So as someone that's technology forward or an early adapter, I'm excited about those types of things because whatever information I can share that's going to make my life easier. I run two businesses. I have children, I have a household, I have a spouse, there's many things. So whatever data I can give, right now in our home, we use, I hate to say it out loud because it's going to wake up, but Google Home. But so the more data I give it, the more of an assistant it is to me to say, hey, you need to leave by XYZ time, or hey, we know you watch this content, you might want to watch this. I enjoy that. But many people are conscientious about, how their data is being utilized, and they're concerned about ownership of the data. And they're also concerned about the monetization of their data and them not getting a piece of the pie. And so first thing I would always say is, spend some time. I know it's a lot of information to read, but if you do have some concerns, spend some time reading the privacy policy of the platforms you're concerned about. The privacy regulators now make it very, I'll say this, they're very tough on data collectors or any brands or apps and so forth, because they want to make sure the privacy policies are in everyday words for people to understand what's happening with it. So it should be an easy read and a quick read. If you're concerned about it, read it. Save it for later. If you want to opt into the app right away, and save it for later for some fireside reading. After that, another thing that you can always know is due to GDPR and CCPA, there's no United States flat data policy, but there are data standards in each state, and they all pretty much are along the same lines. With that being said, you have the opportunity to request your data and to request for it to be deleted. So with that, you can always say, you know what, I want to use this app. I want to see what it's about. And then after a while, if you don't want them to use your data anymore, it's a very straightforward process to have your data removed, to state that you don't want them to use your data. But first, download your data first. If you've ever taken the chance or had the opportunity to look at a data file, it's extremely interesting. But download your data first so you can see exactly what they're tracking on you. You can see exactly what's being captured, and you might find out something about yourself as well. So download your data file. Most of the times they're in Excel formats, so it's kind of easy to read. Sometimes they're in HTML or other XML formats, and so you can't really view it very well. But we do have at Streamlytics, where I'm Chief Growth Officer, we do have consumer-facing platforms where people can upload their data file and view it in an easier to read way. So if we have that, other platforms have that. So there's plenty of tools out there to help you understand how to read your data if you do download it. With all that being said, I did get a little long-winded. With all that being said, consumers are concerned, about how their data is being used. I would say use your best judgment. All the information is typically up front, and if you want to, pull your data from those platforms, do it. But for those that are as concerned, there's many options for you to utilize it to make things easier for yourself.
I think it's a great time to talk about it. You mentioned that you run two businesses, and then you mentioned the name of one of them. Can you talk about what Streamlytics is? As you mentioned, the idea of being able to know your data and potentially benefit from your data. What is Streamlytics?
So Streamlytics is an artificial intelligence data company. And so what that basically means, layman's term, is we have over 10 billion data points of consumer activity. And so what that means is we have data points of how consumers are using everyday applications, and we use that raw data in order to help businesses, brands, companies, platforms to inform them of insights of how to basically get more customers, understand forecasts and trends, leveraging artificial intelligence. And so I'm trying to find a way to make it a little bit more layman's term, because I know I used a lot of marketing speak there. Basically, we have raw data that everyday people have shared with us. But the interesting part is, in this platform, everyday people are able to get paid. So what that means is when you go to any of the Streamlytics consumer-facing applications, you go there, you read the privacy policy. At that point, you declare that the data that you want to provide Streamlytics is your data, and you also declare that you understand that the data will be sold and it'll be anonymized. That anonymous data that we capture from everyday consumers, again, we anonymize it, we clean it, we verify it, and so forth, and we pay the consumers. So at that point, consumers are getting paid. You're getting a data license. We can try to make the process as ethical as possible, because the way in which most of these brands and companies and apps are leveraging data, there's some pretty unethical methods of application and practices happening here. So we try to make sure, hey, this is a new way, in order for the consumers to be involved and to get a piece of the piece of the pie when it comes to the big data game. And then from there, we take that data and it is synergized, and we merge it with additional metadata, and it becomes a completely new data feed. So at that point, it's a data feed that Streamlytics owns, that we own, and then it's anonymized. And from there, we're able to look to forecast and see trends. Some of the trends we've seen, we've been able to understand the when, where, and how of how females are becoming more leaders in the gaming space. We've also seen how African American males, their personal health habits and grooming habits have changed over the years. Way back in the day, you would understand that African American males didn't want to go to the doctor, they didn't prioritize their health and so forth. And now with the data that we have, that we've been able to extract some insights, we can see how African American males are prioritizing health. They're prioritizing mental health, social emotional wellness, as well as beauty. And then from there, those insights we're able to provide to our customers so they can understand, the nitty gritty as far as, okay, if they buy this brand of soap, how much are they paying for it? And what else are they buying with XYZ brand of soap? And we get this data because, again, consumers are uploading data from Amazon Shopping, Amazon Prime, Netflix, Amazon owns Whole Foods. So you get brick and mortar, you get consumption habits, you get consumption habits of content. So whether it's YouTube data or because we get data from Google, we also have data from Disney Plus. So all those platforms we're able to wrap together and create a digital footprint, and then extract consumer insights or consumer personas or profiles to make it more digestible for companies. Because at the end of the day, what I just described, no company wants to do. Most of their aspects are, how do you do it? It's too much data. We don't know. They just don't know what they don't know, and then they don't want to do it because, as you know, we're in a society where when people pay for something, they expect it to be exactly to fill their need and what they need and be as easy as possible. And so what we do is we make that digestible with insights first. If customers aren't amenable to purchasing a full data stream, then with the insights, they can take that, they can read it, it's in lay terms, and they can go from there. So that's Streamlytics, and I have the agency, Idyllic agency, and so we basically have a Streamlytics data feed that we purchased, and so we use that with our own customers. Because at the end of the day, the best way to sell something is to show somebody how to use it and apply it. They may not understand the product, but they always understand the application because it's more obtainable and it's more achievable to them.
Fantastic. I don't know any brand or company that wouldn't want to make more money, which is what you started with. It's, I'm here to help your brand make more money. That's it. How do we measure the effectiveness of advertising campaigns that are based on consumer data in the digital era versus the traditional era, the 100 years before, 50 years before? Is it the same? Is it changed drastically?
It's changed drastically, and I'll say it typically depends on the goals of the advertiser, right? Oftentimes the advertisers, it just depends on what they're looking to achieve, and then that's how you measure the effectiveness. Nowadays, with the depreciation of the cookie, or with the depreciation or the more stringent data regulations across many other websites, there is a bit of a challenge. When Apple released their soft OS 14, That also had people opting out of their data. So what that means is when companies are running advertising campaigns and then they're running something omni-channel, meaning I'm going to spend $2 million to run an advertising campaign in an omni-channel method. So I'm going to purchase broadcast, I'm going to purchase terrestrial, I'm going to purchase on demand. I'm also going to purchase paid social and so forth in one area or through a couple of different platforms. Understanding effectiveness is extremely difficult now because the tracking methods where it used to be back in the day, you could say, oh, they clicked on an ad, it did great. Your click-through rate is this. And then once we began to learn click-through rates weren't it, you really wanted to see what is the action that's being taken and what is the return on the investment. And so now there's many ways, in which brands have to, in a multifaceted platform way, and measure their effectiveness. There's one way for awareness. They have various brand studies which they do to understand the awareness to see if it's changed from their benchmark to another level. But aside from that, companies they're looking to see how revenue has grown. How revenue has grown, they'll leverage, they'll look at the retail data, the data that the retailers may have on the back end. Again, it's the connective tissue type thing. It's, hey, I sent this advertisement to Orisha in Dallas, Texas, and then I noticed that the sales at the local Kroger, Orisha went there because Kroger has, her data there as well as a shopper. And so now let's continue to connect the dots. And then there's an identity spine with the platforms that will be able to make some assumptions, and some educated guesses. But at the end of the day, those effectiveness, you have to always kind of take into account or know, you're not going to, it's not a one-to-one anymore. You're not going to be able to say, I did this and this is what I got. It's a long tail game. When you're advertising and spending that amount of money, most advertisers understand that there's going to be waste, there's going to be changes, but they know that they have to do it because someone is talking to their consumer and their customer, and they want to make sure that someone else isn't talking louder than they are. So how measurement has changed, it's evolving. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like moving forward. Many independent advertising platforms, they have their way or they'll have their method in which to measure. But again, that's their third-party measurement, or that'll be their first-party measurement. And so then the brands will have their third-party measurement. And you have to just look at all of the data together and come to a place where you can say, okay, this is where we draw the line. This is what makes sense for an effective advertising campaign. And this is where we've met our mark.
Right. Fantastic. Can you think of any business categories that may be lagging in adopting services like yours that might just be, gold mines for growth? Are there categories that you can think of that are just kind of stuck in the Stone Age because it works that you think would be fertile ground for adoption?
Yeah, actually all of them. To be clear, some of the more forward-thinking, companies are obviously CPG, because they're huge. They're data companies anyway, and retailers, they're huge data companies as well. Walmart is one of the largest data companies that you would ever think about. They're not just really a retailer. And then, so those are some of the leaders in the space. Entertainment, I would say, is looking to understand it. They're trying to, but entertainment is such an old-fashioned business. And with old-fashioned ways, it's like, turning a cruise ship around or steering a cruise ship to a different direction. So that's not overnight. During COVID, during the early parts of COVID, when movie theaters were shut down, many of the entertainment houses were coming to Streamlytics, or we were talking to them because they needed to understand, who was consuming their content, because they would put their content out there. They didn't have box office numbers anymore. They were going direct to stream, and the streaming platforms could tell you what they wanted to. You know what I mean? So there was no way to really check, who was watching this movie that was going direct to stream. And so we would have a lot of conversations with these companies that would take a very long time because most of it was education. We had to educate them to help them understand. They had to figure out, okay, well, what does our internal data insights team look like? What does our internal analytics team look like? How are we going to be able to measure this? And how are we going to work with other brands to, again, synthesize the data so that we can look at the connective tissues to understand what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and how is it verified? So it was a huge educational process, and it's still a long way to go. They're not there yet. There's a lot. COVID really pushed that forward. They've sped up the process of learning more, but television, like I said, in anything in entertainment space, you can't just, put it on television or radio, but even the streaming platforms, or the content providers or the production houses, there's a lot of learning in place, and there's a lot of hesitation with dollars to spend there because, it's outside, of their comfort zone. And to your point, there's so much opportunity there. There's a few production houses that are, leading in the space. Some we would talk to, they were already, leveraging data, and AI to try to understand predictability. As you probably, if you're a Netflix or an Amazon consumer, with Amazon Prime and with Netflix, you probably see that they're out ahead of the game with their own data. You get recommendations for content, easily, and you see that they pivot and obtain content very quickly. Their content acquisition game is extremely refined, but there are so many other platforms that have that capability and the ability to do it. It's just, investing in it and being comfortable with investing in it, especially in these times where things are, kind of uncertain when it comes to technology.
So there's the converse question. You mentioned a couple companies. You mentioned Walmart. You mentioned Netflix and a couple of the streaming platforms. Who's crushing it? Who's really leading the charge in use of audience data to grow their marketplace, grow their place in the market and their audience base?
That's a good question. I don't know. I might be stumped. Like I said, I feel like companies like Walmart and Target, they do a really great job because they acquire the data and they act on it quickly. So there's a lot of companies and brands that have the data, Amazon too. They have the data and they hold it, for a long time and try to understand it and study it and learn it. But technology and consumption of customers, and when you think of just macroeconomics, all of that stuff kind of moves fast. And especially, if you're in, a recession or if you're in an economic boom, those times you need to be able to react quickly, read the tea leaves, react quickly, and move forward quickly. Hedge funds obviously are crushing it. They don't have a problem, leveraging this type of data and mining it. This is what they do all day. They mine this type of data, raw data, zero-party data, first-party data, analyze it very quickly and make investments very quickly. So those are the companies that are definitely, but it's their habit. It's what they've been doing for a long time. Those companies move very quickly. The other companies that are, they would be considered, great big data companies. They move kind of slow because it's like, okay, where do we invest? They haven't really got it seems as if the confidence is not, where it could be as far as, leveraging this information and really seeing an ROI quickly. Right.
I know we're going to get to see you at NAB in Las Vegas next month. I'm looking forward to joining the Data Tour, which I'll be a big part of, but also to come see you do the panel discussion. How else, aside from coming to the NAB show, where should we look to find out more about you and your service and what you're doing?
Thank you for that. Excellent question. I would say 2 platforms that I utilize, LinkedIn. I would definitely look up my name, Arisha, Arisha Smith. There's not a lot of Arisha Smiths, but over the years it's become more Orishas. So you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. You can definitely find me on Instagram. This is perfect timing. We have a couple of new content series rolling out over the next couple of weeks. And so this discussion and similar discussions like this will continue. And then I hope to participate in a few more podcasts as well, because I feel like the podcast and these video interviews, it really solidifies what we're putting out there in writing and what we're putting out there in small digestible segments on social media.
Great. And I'm going to definitely have you on the Black Futurist Podcast, which is my show. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to seeing you. That's right. You can't escape me. You're in my orbit now.
I was thinking about the tours. I think this is going to be something that's going to make it real for a lot of consumers at the NAB show. The tours, so we talk about all this stuff and it's kind of in the ether. But when you're able to take the tours and look at the companies that are doing this, what we're talking about, and you can see their representatives. Bryndan, I know you do this all the time with the tours. And so it's old hat to you, but I think for the people that are attending the show, I think it makes it real. So come to the show, definitely take the tour, definitely come to the panel. And at that point, you've really got a really solid understanding of what you kind of want to take back, to your companies, to your businesses, or, just how you want to continue to evolve in this space moving forward. What do you think about that?
I agree wholeheartedly. The tours are fantastic. I think they're the most educational because we're not just dealing with one particular brand and their approach to their use of data, their collection of data. We get a cross section of what the best in the world are doing. And you can then, take your own information that from your perspective of what would work for your company, what would work for your brand, and whose approach did you like better? Whose do you think would plug in well to your organization? And so I love the tours. I love the idea of meeting both the brand spokespeople as well as the tour personnel, people who are coming on to take the tour. I think we learn a lot from each other. And I think that's another part that's not often talked about is how much multiple people from different brands who take a tour together learn from each other when it's negotiated correctly. So I love doing it. It's a bright spot in my year to do these tours. Excellent.
That's great. Looking forward to that as well.
Yep. Looking forward to seeing you all in April in Las Vegas at the NAB Show, the 100th anniversary. I'm Bryndan Moore, the Black Futurist Podcast host, as well as brand manager for Brooklyn Tea. I'd love for you to, if you're a tea lover, visit brooklyntea.com. And I'm looking forward to seeing you and Orisha in Las Vegas very soon.